In San Marcos, Texas, the courtroom was packed, the air thick with the oppressive summer heat and the weight of the impending decision. All eyes were fixed on Judge Harold Cranston, a man whose reputation preceded him. Known for his unyielding judgments and firm adherence to the law, Judge Cranston was a symbol of authority and impartiality in the small town. At 68, with nearly 4 decades on the bench, his face bore the lines of a man who had seen it all. Every kind of crime, every plea for mercy. The defendant, 12-year-old Caleb Warner, stood at the defense table, his hands trembling but his gaze steady. He was thin, with wide brown eyes that seemed to absorb every detail around him. Despite his youth, Caleb wore the expression of someone far older, as if the weight of the world had already pressed down on his small shoulders. He had maintained his innocence from the start, even as he was arrested for the armed robbery of a convenience store that left the clerk in critical condition. Yet today his voice would not matter. "Master Warner," Judge Cranston began, his deep baritone filling the room, "you stand convicted by a jury of your peers for crimes that have left a permanent scar on this community. Your actions, reckless and deliberate, have caused immense harm." The boy's mother, seated in the back row, stifled a sob. She had pleaded with the court to see Caleb as more than just a case number, to see the son she had raised, the child who loved science and dreamed of becoming an astronaut. But the evidence had spoken louder. Eyewitness accounts, grainy surveillance footage, and an anonymous tip that sealed Caleb's fate. "I hereby sentence you to 70 years in state custody," Cranston declared, his gavel striking the oak block. The sound echoed like a final heartbeat. Caleb stood motionless, his lips pressed into a thin line, as if holding back tears or words that would never change a thing. The room erupted into murmurs, gasps, and the frantic scribbling of reporters' pens. Caleb turned to glance at his mother one last time before being led away, his shackled footsteps fading, leaving only silence behind. "For you, a free like is easy, but for me, it is the greatest support and encouragement. For this video, can you give me 1 like and 1 subscription? Thank you very much." Judge Cranston returned to his chambers and poured himself a cup of black coffee, staring into its swirling surface. The day had been long, but justice, as he saw it, had been served. Yet a faint unease lingered, a whisper of doubt that he quickly dismissed as fatigue. Unbeknownst to him, the truth he had just buried would soon claw its way to the surface. The trial had been a spectacle, dubbed the Warner case by local news outlets. The robbery of Parker's corner store had captured public attention, not just for its brazenness, but for its consequences. A masked assailant had stormed the store on a quiet Tuesday evening, brandishing a weapon and escaping with $5,000 in cash and merchandise. The chaos left the store clerk, Harold Peters, fighting for his life after being shot during the robbery. Caleb Warner, a 7th grader with no prior record, was arrested 2 weeks later following an anonymous tip. The prosecution painted a damning picture. Items matching those stolen during the robbery were recovered from a storage locker under Caleb's name. Surveillance footage showed a figure of similar build, and eyewitnesses claimed Caleb's voice matched the suspects. Most damning of all were the fingerprints on the weapon left behind, which matched Caleb's. His defense attorney, overworked and underpaid, struggled to counter the mountain of evidence. Caleb insisted, "I didn't do this. I was home that night," but his alibi crumbled when his older brother, the only potential witness, admitted he hadn't seen Caleb for hours that evening. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning with a guilty verdict. Caleb didn't flinch as the foreperson read the decision, but the tightening of his jaw betrayed his inner turmoil. Judge Cranston, impartial as always, prepared to deliver what he felt was a fair sentence. He had seen criminals of all kinds, and to him, Caleb was no different. The evidence was clear, the punishment fitting. Yet, As Cranston signed the sentencing papers that evening, a nagging thought lingered. Something about the case felt incomplete. Weeks turned into months. Caleb languished in juvenile detention, awaiting transfer to a high-security facility. Meanwhile, Judge Cranston's life continued as usual. That was until a nondescript file landed on his desk one quiet afternoon. It was part of an unrelated police misconduct investigation, but a single name caught his eye: Caleb Warner. Cranston frowned and flipped through the pages. The file detailed an evidence log from a separate case, including a weapon, a handgun, that matched the one used in the Parker's corner store robbery. The problem? This gun had been confiscated in an unrelated arrest days before Caleb's alibi. Cranston leaned back in his chair, his pulse quickening. If the weapon had already been in police custody, it couldn't have been used in the robbery. He cross-referenced the serial number with Caleb's trial documents. It was an exact match. A cold realization crept over him. The evidence against Caleb was flawed, possibly manipulated. Cranston requested the full case file for the unrelated arrest. When it arrived, it painted a troubling picture. The arresting officer, Detective Alan Ruiz, had also been the lead investigator in Caleb's case. Determined to uncover the truth, Cranston contacted his old friend and retired investigator Thomas Greer for a late-night coffee meeting at a diner on the outskirts of town. Cranston laid out his findings. "This isn't negligence," Greer said, his voice low but firm. "This is a setup." Together, they began to dig. Within weeks, they uncovered falsified reports, altered witness statements, and a troubling pattern of behavior from Detective Ruiz. One witness, a teenage cashier who had initially identified another suspect, admitted he had been pressured into changing his testimony. "Ruiz told me if I didn't cooperate, I'd be charged as an accomplice," the boy confessed. The final piece of the puzzle came when Greer managed to recover deleted emails from Ruiz's police account. One email sent to the district attorney outlined a plan to secure a conviction in Caleb's case, complete with fabricated evidence. Attached was a list of manipulated items, including the weapon and fingerprints. Cranston's hands trembled as he read the document. The system he had devoted his life to was deeply flawed. Yet there was no time for despair. He had the proof he needed to act. Cranston filed a motion to reopen Caleb's case, attaching the damning evidence against Ruiz. The motion sent shockwaves through the courthouse. Some praised Cranston's courage, others questioned his motives. The backlash was swift and personal. Anonymous threats flooded his phone. His tires were slashed and a note was left on his car: "Drop it or else." But Cranston was resolute. The boy he had sentenced deserved justice. Detective Ruiz denied the allegations, calling them a baseless attack on his career. But as the investigation deepened, the walls closed in. Surveillance footage from a parking lot near the store on the night of the robbery showed a man matching Ruiz's description carrying a duffel bag. The implication was clear. Ruiz had orchestrated the robbery and framed Caleb to cover his tracks. Cranston called for an emergency hearing. The courtroom was packed as the footage played. Gasps rippled through the crowd as the truth became undeniable. "This man," Cranston said, pointing to the screen, "manipulated evidence, coerced witnesses, and framed an innocent child. We failed Caleb Warner, and it's time to make it right." Ruiz, sitting in the gallery, was arrested on the spot. "You don't know what you've started," he hissed as he was led away. Weeks later, Caleb's conviction was overturned. The courtroom erupted in applause as the boy was freed. His mother clung to him, tears streaming down her face. Cranston watched from the back, a rare smile softening his features. Justice had prevailed, but it had come at a cost. The fallout from the case was immense. Ruiz faced criminal charges, and a federal investigation into the San Marcos Police Department uncovered widespread corruption. Cranston's actions sparked nationwide calls for reform, and Caleb's story became a beacon of hope. Despite the accolades, Cranston remained introspective. He had seen the system's flaws firsthand and vowed to spend the rest of his career fighting for change. As for Caleb, his journey was just beginning. He dedicated himself to helping others who had been wrongfully convicted, becoming a symbol of resilience and the pursuit of truth. Their story was a reminder that justice requires vigilance and courage, and that even in the darkest moments, the truth can prevail.